To know me or be a client at Personalized Fitness or a fan of the Personalized Fitness podcast is to definitely understand that I have a whole problem with this aging thing. I do a talk all the time on the lie of age. I'm actually working on a book about that, and that's a multi-billion-dollar business now of different age-defining creams and products that are out there. There's also a lot of articles that come out. There's a lot of research being done on this, and just recently we had an article come out in the Wall Street Journal dealing with whether or not somebody could live to 100, and it seems in their conclusions that this isn't possible, that we may have found the end. I want to delve into that today, and either I'm going to throw down my sword, or maybe, just maybe, I can refute some of their conclusions, talking about, will you live to be 100? Today on the Personalized Fitness Podcast.
Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or PersonalEdgeFitness.com.
Good day and welcome to the Personalized Fitness Podcast. My name is Garrett Williamson. I'm president of Personalized Fitness. Thank you so much for joining me today on Dispelling the Myths of Health, Fitness, and Wellness, and actually talking today about an article that I received. I've received a lot of these from time to time dealing with longevity and whether or not this particular one about whether or not you'll live to be 100. Now, I'm going to try not to go too long in this because I think I could be on this subject forever. Let me tell you how to get in touch with the show if you have any questions, and especially questions about this podcast or any others, or if you have any questions about dealing with dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness, please give me a call at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach me at Garrett, Garrett, at personalizedfitness.com. Personalizedfitness.com, of course, is our website. It's also the name of our Facebook page, Personalized Fitness, and you can hit me up on X at Team PE if you are so inclined. I guess the reason I'm moving so fast, there's a lot of material here that I want to go over, and I know I'll get off track from time to time, but I've even got a little bit of an outline here. But I'm going over an article, as I said in the introduction, and this was sent to me by a client and friend. And I get a lot of these because of talking about the lie of age, and thousands of people now that have heard me talk about this. And if they find an article, they'll send it to me, which I greatly appreciate. And by the way, if you happen to be one of those people, please continue to do so. I greatly appreciate it. I happen to be an online subscriber to the Wall Street Journal, and I would have seen this article, but this particular individual, I literally think she reads the Wall Street Journal before it comes out. I mean, she is on top of it, and I really appreciated it. But she sent it to me, and the title of this article is "Think You Will Live to 100?" ? These scientists think you are wrong. And this was published in the Health and Wellness section of the Wall Street Journal on July 11th of 2024 of this year. It's written by, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, Amy Doxer Marcus. And she is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Now, I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview of what they're talking about here. There's some scientists here that disagree with what they're saying, but the scientists here are basically arguing that we've possibly hit the age plateau. And they say this in the article too. Life expectancy has been increasing about 2.5 years at every I'm not sure if it's every year. It's in here and I'll come across it. But periodically it's on a regular basis, it's increasing by 2.5 years. They're saying that is possibly leveling off and we've possibly hit the top. You know, that's it. We can't live any longer. And also they're making some other arguments. And I'll give you some coverage about this, just kind of an overview, a summary of the individuals involved in these different studies, and also kind of what they're talking about. But you can go check it out. Again, that's the Health and Wellness section of the Wall Street Journal on July 11th. And again, the title is "Think You Will Live to 100? The scientists think you are wrong." It starts off talking about a scientist by the name of and pardon me on these names, I'm going to do my best, I promise you, but Jay Olshansky. And he studies the upper bounds of human longevity at the University of Illinois in Chicago. He believes that people shouldn't expect to live to 100. Most, he contends, will reach the ages of 65 to 90. Now, what does he base that on? He said that human evolution favors growth and reproduction, not living to excess ages. Even though the longevity business is booming, he believes that even the changes that we're seeing about reversing aging, he says that's not going to make that big a difference. And really, it seems like it's kind of plateaued. Now, that's a quick summary to what he said, and we'll talk a little bit more about Olshansky in a minute. There's also some other individuals involved. Dr. Peter Diamandis is a 63-year-old entrepreneur, and he runs longevity trips for investors to meet scientists in the field. He's more into the rejuvenation, talks about we are going to start to understand how to rejuvenate, revitalize ourselves. and that is what science does. Olshansky studied a lot of demographic data. Now, he chose a rather large period. He studied demographic and mortality data from 1990 to 2019. So that's, right at close to, 30 years. So 29 years. In the U.S. and developed countries with the longest living populations. Over those, they say 30 years, but 30 years they found that, it is 30 years. They found that life expectancy slowed. Progress stopped even before the COVID-19 pandemic drove life expectancies down. And he said we waited 3 decades to see what would happen. And I had a lot more, I like the joke he says, I had a lot more hair back then. So he wasn't the only one that was involved in this. Nobel laureate by the name of Venki, remember what I said about these names, Ramakrishnan, he wrote a book called Why We Die. And he was speaking to a group at Harvard about this. And he said he doesn't believe current interventions will dramatically extend lifespan. Techniques to reverse aging would have to help every system in the body, including the brain, over a long period of time. Now, obviously stated, if you're going to live longer and you're going to reverse the quote-unquote aging process, then it can't just work for your fingers. It's got to work for the entire body. That makes sense. And he says it's much more complicated than people think to engineer away the causes of aging. All right, that's what he's talking about. He says that, we may come up with a drug that does this, that, and the other, but trying to engineer away the causes of aging, that's a far reach, is what he's arguing there. Now, there's another individual that got involved, named is James Volpel. His demographer, talked about demographics. He pushed back against what Olshansky was saying in a 2021 paper, and he pointed out that statistics showing that since around 1840, life expectancy at birth has increased almost 2.5 years. This is where I was getting the 2.5 years earlier, per decade in some countries. And they actually published, the Volpel and Olshansky published dueling papers going back and forth about this. Olshansky actually made a bet with another scientist by the name of Stephen Alstad. He's a professor of biology at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and he has talked about somebody living to 150. And he was asked about, when will that person that's going to live to 150 be born? And he actually said, I think they already have. They're already alive. But Alstad and Olshansky actually entered into a bet where they bet $150 each, and they put it into a fund. And when whoever hits that 150 years old first, those funds are going to go to that person or to that person's family, which I thought was kind of interesting. But he agreed with Olshansky that most newborns born now won't live to 100, but he thinks his optimism that someone will live to 150 is justified. He pointed to a study showing that the compound rapamycin extended the lifespan of mice, even if they started getting it later in life. Now, there's a lot more in this article, obviously. But just a couple of things I wanted to state because I'm going to talk about those. And I left a big part of this out at the very, very beginning because it's the argument that scientists and physicians, I believe, continually use to prove that aging exists and there's nothing we can do and it just happens. And I'll show you what I think is the fallacy in their research. Also, I want to bring up that compound rapamycin. Why? Because I know so much about it? No, actually didn't. In fact, before I did this podcast, I actually had to Google rapamycin. I know that there are tons of different compounds, tons of different minerals and medications and vitamins, whatever, that they're studying right now to see if they can find something that will, quote unquote, reverse the aging process. Pardon my quotes, unquote, but y'all know what I mean, what I feel about the word aging. I don't think it means deterioration. In fact, in a minute I'm going to give you automatic deterioration because of time. In a minute I'll give you the definition. But rapamycin, I looked it up. What does it do? It actually has shown in laboratory rats. It has not been cleared for clinical trials, for human trials yet, but it actually shows that it acts as somewhat of a caloric restriction, almost like a GLP-1 shot. It's an appetite suppressant. It's not really an appetite suppressant, but it's a caloric suppressant. By doing that, you end up affecting what they call the mTOR. And that is a process that your body goes into in survival mode. That has a way of protecting the cells and what have you. And that's a very brief overview. I didn't want to do a podcast about rapamycin. Hold on to that thought about the rapamycin, because I talked about at the beginning about Olshansky studying these individuals for 30 years. And he's looking at this population. And this is something that's commonly done. Let's go do, and I call it an observational study, not a clinical study. And the reason being, I'm just looking at this population. I'm looking at data. Did they live long? Did they not live long? And then I'm not diving a whole lot deeper than that. I'm looking at what's their socioeconomic status, and then they did say in here, in some of the studies, that there are now hundreds of millions more people who have reached old age under what they call optimal conditions, benefited from clean water, antibiotics, improved treatments for top killers such as heart disease and cancer, and healthier lifestyles. All right, what am I talking about? Why am I bringing this up? You look at a population of people, and the example I use all the time is the example I use for an observational study versus a clinical study. You look at a group of people, this line of people, and they're on a sidewalk, and all of them seem to be walking funny. And so you want to do a study to find out what's going on. So I'm going to do an observational study, and I'm going to look at those people, and I'm going to see them on that sidewalk, and I'm going to find out, okay, the thing in common here, because they're different ages, they're different races, they're different genders, but they're all on the same sidewalk. Okay, I can quickly deduce that possibly in my observational study, that sidewalk causes some sort of leg damage, feet damage, something, because they're all walking funny. If I do a clinical study, I go up and have another sidewalk, and I line up a bunch of people on it. That's going to be my control group. And I'm going to go to this experimental group of all these people I see that are walking funny, and I'm going to have them get off the sidewalk. I'm going to have these other people walk on the sidewalk and see if there's anything that goes on, and see if they're affected. And I'm also possibly going to talk to the people, interview the people that are actually walking on the sidewalk that are walking funny. And if I went over and talked to them, they may tell me that, yeah, this sidewalk leads to a podiatry clinic where I'll have foot problems. That's a clinical study. That's getting much deeper. Observational study, looking at people for over 30 years in different populations. And so you look at their socioeconomic status may be the same, or their access to clean water may be the same. And they have access to antibiotics and treatments and healthier lifestyles. And I drew the conclusion, well, they've stopped growing old, so therefore, we're all going to stop growing old. That's absurd. I'll tell you why it's absurd. Forget about the clean water. Got it. Important. All the different things I said are important. The access to antibiotics, improved treatments for heart disease and cancer. But then they throw out healthier lifestyles. And what does that mean? I mean, what does healthier lifestyles mean? If you look at the recommended daily allowance of exercise and how many people are exercising regularly and what have you, the recommendations barely recommend resistance training. They recommend a strenuous aerobic activity for a while. Fantastic for your heart, not doing anything for your muscle. And look at several other RDAs, which we're going to get to in just a minute, because it goes to this first part, the part at the very beginning of this that I guess it's Dr. Olshansky that stated, biology is holding us back, is what he stated very early in the article. As people grow older, their cells and tissues, listen to this, accumulate damage. Now, wait a second. Hang on. The argument that I always made about this is that it's amazing when we look at science in anything outside of our body, and we'll find concrete rules. For instance, in the 1700s, a French scientist proved that all mass has already been created. You ask any scientist, has all mass already been created? They're going to say yes. And what does that mean? That means that unless a meteor hits this earth, everything on the earth that is all pieces of mass, it's here. It's already here. When you go build a building, you didn't create mass. You cut down trees. You made them into boards. You took sand. You made concrete. But all that stuff already existed, except when it comes to our bodies. We actually believe there are people out there that believe if I eat a 5-ounce cupcake, but it's chocolate and it's bad food, I'm going to gain 7 pounds. Impossible. I mean, a cupcake that's, I don't know, I'm making up a number, it's 200 calories, all of a sudden became, 7 times 3,500 calories. It's physically impossible. It's amazing what we believe about our bodies that contradict normal science. Now, let's go back to the statement. Accumulate damage. So, your 16-year-old comes home with his car, and you gave him this hand-me-down car. It's about 4 or 5 years old. And he comes home, and he's got a dent in the side of it. And you ask him, son, daughter, whichever, what happened? Well, Dad, it's this many years old. It accumulated damage. You don't accumulate damage. Things don't just automatically happen in the human body. It just happens. It just occurs. No. And I'll tell you why. A minute ago I told you I'd give you the definition of aging. It's easy. The process of change in the properties of a material occurring over a period of time, either, watch this, either spontaneously or through deliberate action. And the argument that we make to try to make aging be defined as it automatically happens because of time is that this stuff is just spontaneously happening. Here's the rub. We blame those things typically on genetics. Well, just genetics. You got genetics and that just happens. That's all there is to it. In other words, I don't have a better answer for you. And then all of a sudden, modern medical science, because the human body is an amazing thing. We've been studying it since the 1500s. Still don't know everything about it. Next year we'll know more. Next year we'll know more. Next year we'll know more. And every year they chip away at that whole genetics BS. Not that genetics doesn't have something to do with it. I'm short. You go look in the genes of my parents. You know why I'm short. I got blonde hair. You look in the genes of my parents. You know why. But a lot of these things that we think are genetic, we're actually causing them. Goes back to that definition. Changes in the properties of a material occurring over a period of time, either spontaneously or through deliberate action. If Olshansky is talking about the fact that we have accumulated damage to the cells, then something has happened. Something has occurred. And if you look at it, the majority of the research, the whole reason I brought up this thing about rapamycin, the reason I brought that up is that most of the studies that are being done on aging are to reverse effects of aging. Why? Why? Because we could look at preventing it, and I'll get to that in a second. But why are we looking at reversing? Well, because if we can find a material that reverses aging, we can sell something to you. We can package this up, and we can get a lot of people to buy it. Doesn't mean I'm against it. All for it. Fantastic. Not a problem. I'm a Christian first and a capitalist second. But to sit here and state that people shouldn't expect to live to 100 because biology is holding us back, because we are built for reproduction, not excessive ages, because we accumulate damage, because we don't know what's going on. It just spontaneously happens. Really? Let me show you some stuff that we know. This is not just Garrett Williamson that knows this. This is commonly known. Evidence is out there. In fact, entire practices of health, all practices of health are built. They're built on the fact that the body can repair itself. We know that. Your doctor knows that. If you have a cut on your arm and you have to get it sewed up, the reason the doctor sews it up is because he wants to rejoin the material because he knows it's going to repair itself. This is why physical therapy exists. This is why personal training exists, why exercise exists. Because we know that when we break something down, the body will repair it. So cells are constantly regenerating at different results. In this article, they state that they're actually building back, but they're building back weaker. All right? Go out of the body, where science changes, completely different than out in the real world. But let's say we built a building, then we tore it down. Then when we built it back weaker. I wonder why. Well, it's just time that caused that. No, come on. Think about it. Why did we build it back weaker? Well, we used cheaper material. We didn't use as much. We didn't use as big a boards. We didn't use as thick as sheetrock. We didn't use we used too thin a mixture in the concrete. Something. That's why it built back weaker. But not in our body. No, it just, this date happens, all of a sudden that cell gets built back weaker. Bull. And I'll tell you why. I said that originally we know this. This is nothing unheard of. Well, if you're going to build something back weaker, then you're going to need weaker material, right? What makes up most of our cells? Water. You've heard that. We are mostly water. Our body is mostly water. Cells are made up mostly of water. Okay? So water would be one of the things in cells that would build a cell, wouldn't it? I mean, it's the largest part of the cell is water. So if we affected that material, didn't have enough of it, then it would probably make a weaker cell, wouldn't it? And mind you, this is only one part of the cell. It's the largest part. It's one part of it. I wonder if this would have any effect, something that we already know would have any effect of that. The percentage of adults deficient in water, drinking enough water every day, is 80%. 80% of the adults walking the earth are deficient in water. I wonder why our cells aren't magically building back stronger. It's unknown. We got to go study it. We got to go find a supplement that we can take to build that cell up stronger. No, we could just drink water. We could give our body the supplies that it needs. That's just one. How about this? Do you know that you cannot build, I don't want to build muscle. Okay, we can't build muscle. All right, you can't maintain muscle without protein. What do I mean by maintaining? I'm holding up my water bottle here. Okay, if I hold it up long enough, I may be doing it right now. But if I hold it up long enough and cause enough strain here, I'm going to start doing micro tears in my muscle by doing this. As my muscle starts to burn, that's micro tears. I'm feeling it right now. I can feel, did a workout this morning, so I can feel a little bit right now. Those are micro tears. That my muscles are tearing, just little tiny tears, and they're releasing lactic acid, burning the muscle, telling the brain, stop it. And so I'm having micro tears. I'm going to set that bottle down. I'm not worried about those micro tears. Why? Because I ate enough calories and I need enough protein. What's that got to do with anything? Well, my body's going to take those calories and make sure I got enough energy, and then it's going to do a systems check. It's doing this from the cradle to the grave. Every single health professional that has any worthwhile degree knows this. It's doing a constant systems check, and it's going to look, hey, wait a second, look at that bicep over there. Did that idiot sit there and hold his bottle up during a podcast? Because he tore some muscle fibers. Okay? Go look in the wood pile, quote unquote, the protein pile. First thing, do we have enough energy? We gotta do some work here. I want to make sure we got enough Gatorade to get through this. Yeah, we got enough calories. Okay, so we got enough energy. Go look in the wood pile. Go look in the protein pile. Do we have some protein over there? Yeah, we sure do. Let's make some muscle out of it. And it's going to repair that muscle from the cradle to the grave at the same speed, at the same time, at the same flavor. Yeah, you build back muscle, but you build it back slower. No, you don't. Build it back at the same rate. Take somebody that's 90 years old that is in a completely atrophied state, and you take a 16-year-old and you atrophy them the exact same way. Their recovery, their build back is going to be at the same pace, same speed, same everything. Does not change. We know this. This is not a guess. Why do I bring this up? Water. 80% of adults are deficient in that. Protein? 46% of adults are deficient in protein. I argue they even measure it wrong. But by their standards, 46% are deficient in protein. Seniors? 75% are deficient in protein. So, Dr. Oshansky, the reason these cells are building back weaker and we don't know, there's your evidence right there. That's just two things. How about calcium? Has something to do with bone. Everybody knows that, doesn't it? 40% of adults are deficient in that. Iron. 2% of adults, but in minorities, it's 20% of adults are deficient in that. Magnesium, which has effects on diabetes, celiac disease, osteoporosis. 61% of adults are deficient in that. Potassium, 97%. Vitamin D for blood pressure, heart disease, osteoporosis, 95%. And then the other one, the number one, and you've heard me talk about this before, the number one risk factor for 7 of the top 10 killers, 42% of the population is obese. By the way, that causes damage. And I have here actually 75%. The reason being is they use that ridiculous guesstimation called BMI, which is worthless. Ignore anybody that ever tells you what your BMI is. It's completely worthless. That's what they're using to measure this, which is mismeasuring seniors at a disastrous rate. So what about exercise? That has something to do with it, Garrett. You talk about exercise all the time. Absolutely. The only exercise that we're typically recommended to us for years has been cardiovascular exercise. Now you can sort of find it at the National Institute of Health that, yeah, we do recommend a couple of days of resistance training. But we already know we begin to atrophy muscle 72 hours after a workout. So if you atrophy it and you're not getting enough protein, not building it back, or if you're just doing 2 days and sometimes that's 1 day and sometimes that's 2 days, and only less than 20% of the world works out on a regular basis, even less than that does resistance training on a regular basis, then we are atrophying muscle, we are damaging ourselves. This is the problem that I have with these studies and all of these that I've seen. Well, we looked at these people and they're not getting older, so therefore you won't either. And by the way, we saw damage in cells, it just happened, and you're not putting 2 and 2 together. Facts that we already know with facts that you supposedly are finding. I don't mean to criticize the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of this article. I'm sure it sold a lot of papers, because people want to believe this, but it's absurd. And there's not a whole lot of money in dispelling this myth. But I still contend the 5 components of aging: genetics, stress, nutrition, activity, healthcare. Of those 5 of aging, you can't control genetics. You can pick your nose, but you can't pick your parents. All of those other 4 are 100% controllable. And when it comes to ability, which is what we're talking about, gosh, Garrett, when I was 18, I could do amazing things. I was able. Now that I'm 90, I can't. That's ability. The 4 components of ability: fitness, nutrition, lifestyle, mindset, and all 4 100% controllable, 100% your responsibility, 100% your fault, clinically proven. And if they're your fault and they're your responsibility, then it means you can affect them and you can change them and you can reach your level of wellness for as long as you want. Don't let anybody tell you different. And if they do, tell them I called them a liar. You can reach me at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. Also at Garrett, Garrett, at Personal Edge Fitness, personaledgefitness.com. Personal Edge Fitness is our Facebook page. Hit me up on X at Team PE. I'd love to hear from you. Living longer, intentionally putting the facts together, learning the truth. It's just one more way we help you reach your level of wellness. Thank you so much for tuning in. Holler at me if you have any questions, and I hope to see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.